Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this new workshop of our research project, Strengthening Rule of Law by Artificial Intelligence. Today we have a very distinguished guest and a very good friend of all of us, Dr. Fotis Fitsilis. Fotis, like this.
It's like Andrea and so Fotis is small, Fotis is the old photo.
Since we are very formal so far, Fotis, Dr. Fotis Fitsilis, to talk about a very important topic, which is very related in our research project. You know, our research project has 3 pillars related to artificial intelligence: judiciary, parliament, and administration, and also with the oversight authorities. And now we have maybe one academic and also professional person who is more expert related to these issues, artificial intelligence and parliamentary institutions. It is very important to address the unique profile of Dr. Fitsilis. He's an engineer, so it is a very important thing to address because lawyers are all the time trying to understand things related to artificial intelligence, but with your background, I think it's easier for you to address these difficulties. But since 2007, he has been a key figure in the Hellenic Parliament in Greece, where you are currently service as head of the Department for Científica, Documentation and Supervision, within the Scientific Service. Right? This is your current occupation.
It's a very long title to say that I deal with parliamentary data. In short, if you read it, nobody understands what this is, including ourselves.
That's true. Well, through your career, you have been positioned at the forefront of the digital innovation. You are the founder of Helénico OCR team, which is a globally pioneering initiative for the processing and analyzing of parliamentary data. That's true. And furthermore, you have led international working groups to develop ethical and operational guidelines on how to responsibly integrate artificial intelligence into Parliament. You've published a lot, like a dozen of books, yeah?
Half a dozen
of books, but many scientific publications. May I stress smart parliamentary status in democracy? It's one of the best ones. And also, you have collaborated in drafting this masterpiece thing, guidelines of artificial intelligence in Parliament, which is probably the most useful piece of work nowadays regarding this topic.
Or at least comes part 2 of this.
Really?
2 months from now.
2 months. So it's uploaded in the
Westminster Foundation.
It's a Westminster Foundation website. It's uploaded in English, in German, also in Spanish. Already.
In 10 languages.
In 10 languages.
Yes. As soon as Swahili as well.
Swahili. So you see how the speed of the work of Fotis Fitsilis is in the world. So I don't want to take more time in your presentation. It's a real pleasure because truly I have listened to him several times talking about this topic, and I think it's one of the, I'd say the one, but true, it is one of the most expert in the field, artificial intelligence and parliamentary institutions. So now you have the floor with the seminar that you have titled Parliamentary Reality and Academic Contributions in the Field of Artificial Intelligence. I'm going to share the presentation. Those of you are at home, I hope you can opening the floor after this disaster. Let's call you a friend. After this disaster, the floor is yours.
Dear Professor Ramos, my dear friend Mario, dear friend Nadia, Rafa, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, and everybody that is watching us at home. It is really a very big, I would say, honor, maybe that's the right word, to be able to address you, not only because of the esteemed colleagues that are present, but also because it's, I'm getting a little bit sentimental, because it's already 10 years since I last been here. I think it was maybe 2017 or 16, something like this. So I have been then for a very limited time, unfortunately, active as a visiting professor at the Documentación. And it was a very good memories around this. And the fact that I'm back here as, let's say, as an expert, as a friend to address you, makes really some emotions go high. I will try to be as sober as possible and necessary to address this quite important topic. And because I don't want to repeat things that you might have heard in the past, maybe from different perspectives, I give it this because this is not this topic that includes this term artificial intelligence can be watched upon from various angles. It can be political, it can be institutional, it can be from a legal, purely legal, constitutional, or only technical. So it's a very complex topic, obviously, because artificial intelligence is not one thing. So, and if you go to some, let's say, hardcore AI conferences, where the people that work on that are mostly mathematicians or data science, so they're very deep in this matter, they can't even figure out or agree what's actually artificial intelligence and how you can define it. For our purpose, so in order to be able to communicate today, I will try to provide, a rather broad approach that the science, that let's say the science around institutions finds it maybe more comfortable to work with. For us, artificial intelligence is, in principle, is a feature that we can add on established systems. We call that legacy systems that are already there in institutions, in parliaments, in governments, local governments. So because parliaments can be at various levels, of course. And we see artificial intelligence as an additional, as an add-on in order to support existing processes and make them more efficient and make them more useful and perhaps more to bridge the gap between what is going out there in society around artificial intelligence and what is going on in institutions. And this huge gap that is scientifically, it's called the pacing problem, the two different paces, it needs to be bridged. It needs to be bridged. Otherwise, institutions, and that's the problem, actually, risk become irrelevant. That's the main issue that political science debates. It's not, of course, we would love to have the Parliament of the 21st century full of AI and fully modernized, and this would be maybe a wonderful thing if we do it responsibly. But essential, the core aspect of our approaches is more defensive. So as an engineer, I have a natural, let's say, a natural move, to go and insert technology in everything. So who says that this is responsible? This is why artificial intelligence has to be also perceived as a science or as a field of operation that is rather interdisciplinary. You need exactly as many lawyers as linguists, lawyers, and political sciences, and who knows what other disciplines in order to balance the risks with the possibilities. So this is very simple, of course. But if you go to any advanced conference, don't hear talking about this. Everybody says, okay, we are going to implement this and go through the wall and enter artificial intelligence everywhere. Of course, this is possible. I would say the terrifying thing, and kindly take my word on this, the terrifying thing is that this is very simple. So this is recorded?
Yes,
Yes.
but we can stop it.
No. I mean, is it publicly shown or is it for internal?
We will upload it to our YouTube.
Okay.
So,
You prefer it to be remain private?
No, okay. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't want to share anything confidential. But let's say that we run several experiments with our groups, research groups, and you try to be the previous approach, let's say the previous generation of artificial intelligence, which we call, let's say, generative AI, because generates one word after the other and complete text sequences. So this was already the past. This is already the past. So now it is all about agents. So multiple of those systems collaborating to produce something. And since administration is actually the core sandbox that can be literally disrupted by all this. Because what is administration? Is a series of tasks, a series of steps. This is, on top of that, this is very well defined through law. So it's very simple. And if you see it for the first time, it's surprisingly simple. Then if you embody it, then you see that this is natural. So as technology and the systems go more mature, it becomes simpler for let's say, even undergraduates to simulate entire organizations like parliaments. So we try to do something like this. In lawmaking, there's a feature that is called regulatory impact assessment. So in Europe, it's now not now, but in the past years, it has been a very big thing on how to implement it in all legal orders, because of course it's important to do ex ante and ex post assessments. So both is of course important. And we thought, okay, this is the holy grail. I mean, I hope I'm not offending someone of let's say, it's the holy grail of legislative automation, to bring in this kind of technologies and then try to automate the process of generating the regulatory impact assessment. So we started very cautiously. An impact assessment is defined in every legal order. In Greece, there is a manual, a legislative manual, and you can see it. You can download it. There's 27 blocks, and lawyers or administrative personnel that were entrusted in developing this would have to do this one by one. And we tried to do it cautiously using agentic systems. And we said, okay, let's do one or two blocks first and then try to expand. Nonsense. It's so easy for that. They can do the whole thing in seconds, while experience in zero shot. Zero shot means without training. And it's much better than the average regulatory impact assessment report. So this makes you think. It makes you think first about the progress that has been achieved in only a few years after the emergence of this technology, after the coming out, because the technology is not new. It's, Google produced the first paper on the transformer architecture in 2017. So attention is all you need. So what I'm saying, it's already in there. So I hope we will circulate the presentation ex post. And you see that in the past 3 years, we are experiencing huge transitions and effects already in the public service. And this makes you think, so what will be next? So when I started developing this presentation, let's say maybe it was 2 weeks ago, something like this, I was thinking, okay, I have to be able to discuss these issues in a context where academics can be involved and not only passively informed, but maybe also actively generate an exchange where we can meaningfully contribute to all this discussion. Hence the title, what is the parliamentary reality now? And what can academia contribute? I mean, is there any room for us to do anything here? Or are we driven completely by huge corporations? These are private corporations, by the way. So are we going to play a role in the very few years to come? And what will be this role? That's the main thing that I would like to come out of this, of today's presentation. So, okay. So I will speed up during the initial stages because we have discussed the motivation and all this. I mean, maybe a little bit differentiated from what I have there, but nonetheless, that the most important things I think have been said. And we will go now to where we stand now in the parliamentary, in artificial intelligence as a technology, and as at the second step, where we stand now in parliamentary artificial intelligence, which are of course two different things. This is February 2026. We need to have in mind, and that's very important because we have to relativize everything. Just a year ago, 1 year ago, President Trump being elected in the presidential office in the US, announced the famous Stargate project. He said, we will mobilize $500 billion, which is big money, in order to achieve the so-called, coming closer to the singularity maybe, or to achieve supremacy in artificial intelligence in technological aspects. So that US companies, and actually it's all about companies there, they don't talk about institutions, will become, or better say, will retain the leading position that they have in artificial intelligence. 3 days after that, which is also remarkable because it shows the speed that the European Commission can move if it wants. So this cannot be coincidence that Ursula von der Leyen came out 3 days later and said Europe will counter this offensive, and we will mobilize 200 billion euros. It's a lot of money. So 200 billion euros is not some small cash that you can put together in order to make European AI, like sovereign AI. whatever that means. I will elaborate. And not only this, and here Professor Ramos can be also complement my saying. Parallel to this, there was an effort that we all know about on the Commission side, and of course parallel to this on the Council of Europe side. There was an effort, a regulatory effort, to having in mind the powers and the potential of this technology, but also the risks, in order to find a balance, an equilibrium for Europe, important, on how to regulate this technology on European soil. So I won't go into the regulatory aspects more here because this is a planet on its own. If we would have now in front of us its only institutions, they would say, okay, tell us more about this. If you would have here the private sector, the European private sector, they would say, please spare us with this. That's counterproductive, brings nothing on the table, and so on. So obviously, it's a very controversial issue. That it's not the stage to discuss. But what needs to be said at this moment is that Europe is indeed a very interesting playground, where a lot of innovation and a lot of innovative mind and a lot of legal minds come together in order to find this equilibrium that it's not achieved. And so everything, including the GDPR and all these major initiatives that have to do with artificial intelligence and with the data, with our data, eventually everything will be judged in courts. But since this happens, several years will pass. And the problem with this is that artificial intelligence does not wait. So we risk having laws and legal and frameworks and soft laws and whatever in place that are not relevant anymore because the technology will have survived. Now, I'm not going to talk about the very details of this technology because, of course, from the perspective we're looking it upon, it is problematic. It brings nothing really in the discussion. All technology, sufficient complex technology, has been a black box for politicians and for regulators anyway. I mean, who actually knows exactly how this works? I mean, the mobile phone. Of course, you know the general stuff. There are antennas. There are some sort of communication, but eventually you type the number and you talk. That's all you need to know. So AI is not, it's very bluntly said, but in AI, we have to use it to approach it to a certain extent also as a black box, but a black box that is explainable to a certain extent. With these things here, you know exactly what happens. Exactly. So if something happens, there are logs, there are very detailed. If you happen to talk with a terrorist or you are a terrorist, you can be very sure that the system, the authorities will come back to you because all this is being monitored somehow, legally or non-legal. Let's leave it outside. Not much different is also the case with AI, and I'm going slowly towards the risks for parliaments. Imagine, and this is true, I mean, it's not science fiction. By the way, the limits are very, very fuzzy now. What we have considered as science fiction a few years ago, now it's very, very reality. So imagine being a legislator, an MP, and you're working on a law. made on a law proposal. So this is something that not even your party knows about. Whether the law, the legal procedure, if legislative procedures, maybe from the government side, is a bit more structured, usually. So you're working on something, and you're using one of the known models to support you, and they are very good at that. Maybe they're not that good into defining the legal provisions in the way that a top expert, legal expert, would wish to be. Nonetheless, it is very good in defining the broader framework of the regulation. And all this is run through servers that are not on European soil, that are in US soil at best, governed by companies that have interests that are maybe counter the ones of the sovereign state this MP resides on. How can this MP be sure that the information that they are sharing with the system is being treated according to European law? Quick answer: they can. They can't. This is why, and that's not something that's hidden, from the very first moment, T equals 0 of knowing what these systems can do, the European Commission blocked Copilot and ChatGPT from the European Commission systems. Currently, there's no possibility to know what happens with any of your inquiries. And even if you click anything, you can click, by the way, in the professional editions, in some, I don't want to speak openly about the models, I don't want to advertise them, they are already well advertised. You can already check, I don't want my data to be shared. Do you trust that? Come on. We're talking here about multi-trillion businesses, and anybody would care about a tick in one box? I mean, one should be at least naive to believe that. Yeah. But imagine you are still, I'm talking still about a sole MP sitting in some desk anywhere. I mean, we are working now virtually in our house, in our condo, in our office. Sometimes, yeah, we're back in the office with colleagues or alone. And all this, do you recall, I mean, probably you have lots of experience, at least some of us here in the room. There's a principle when you are speaking with a journalist. If you have a microphone in front of you, you always consider it as being on. I think that's a global principle. Mm-hmm. So, same is ChatGPT with these kinds of systems. Well, it's like, it's like Yahoo in the original days. Or if you wanted to say a browser, Google didn't exist back then. Yahoo this or whatever. So it was the only one and only. And this changes quickly. Nobody does it exist anymore. More or less, it's irrelevant. So these companies do not want to be relevant or to become irrelevant because it's huge money involved. And anyway, it's not about only the money, it's about the influence that they exercise. And on top of that, we talked already, I mean, where do we go now? I try to point to the direction how complex and dangerous the system can be. So, and I didn't even speak about China, but you get it. It only makes the problem more complex. So it's a multipolar world. So bipolar plus China, India, who knows what else? It's a multipolar world that everybody competes against the other, and everybody has high interest into achieving supremacy in this field. And we were telling about how complex this, how dangerous this can be for parliaments. Now, let's see it from a slightly different perspective. I think we all get it, that opaque systems can be dubious at least, if not dangerous, for the national. I mean, I don't care about party interests or party, if a party makes something not correct, it can dissolve, but if this is reflected on the country, and the country suffers below, then we talk here about very serious things that cannot be left unattended. And we only considered now only one small piece of the parliamentary business, which is legislation. Okay, it's not small, but it's one of the many pieces, puzzle pieces in this organization that is called Parliament. There was a very interesting study published 6 months ago in August by a subdivision group in MIT that's called NANDA. And these people, they made an empirical study involving 300 private companies. 300 private companies that had implemented AI into their operations. So they made a big study, and I think that was sooner or later something like this would come, to see what was the outcome. So and these were private companies. So private companies are driven by profits. Otherwise, I don't know what this is, something else. So obviously, in order to make profit. So what matters there is implementation on the one side and return on investment on the other. And they measured if this 300, so it's not 1, 2, it's big. This 300 applications of AI had any impact on revenue. It's quite complex and public study. It's not something that was behind a paywall or something. And they found out, not unsurprisingly for everybody that read this study, that only 5%, I repeat, only 5% of these 300 cases, generative AI, okay, it was generative AI because AI is much more complex. Let's say generative, this was specifically generative. And only 5% measured any positive results. Now, please reflect that to parliamentary institutions. How many employees or leaders or administrative personnel would survive this rate? And imagine, this was board decision, take AI, and in order we want profit with high drive, implemented whatever it takes in order to make the best for our profits. And 5% came out positive. What does this say for Parliament? Nothing good. But of course, here, if you think it the rational way, you will always come out surprised, where you shouldn't. And in principle, the outcome that is better to be studied and useful for parliaments, it is not the 95%, it's the 5%. So what were the attributes of these 5% that made them successful? So that's what they did, of course, these people, and they found out that there are a few things that these companies did correct, and potentially parliamentary institutions, but also governance. I mean, this can be, we talk about parliaments because we like them. But this can be reflected on any other institution, NGO or whatever, anything. So, and what is the blueprint for successful implementation? This is not nuclear science again. This is old-fashioned thinking. And we tend not to think so much because the cycles, it's also understandable. The financial cycles become smaller and smaller, profits need to be implemented quicker and quicker. There's no time to think. So what did they say? The positive outcomes that the AI efforts have to be linked not to any marginal stuff, to our core business. So go and try to implement where it actually makes more meaningful. It's more meaningful, and try to measure the outcome. Of course, this is standard. I mean, it's in management science. If you can measure it, then forget it. Don't implement it at all. Then invest your data. So data is king. We knew that, of course, since at least the last 20 years. It becomes now even more important. Invest in the governance of your data, so structure them, archive them, annotate them, learn about your data, and try to build feedback loops. Try to create feedback loops so that you can get more and more out of this information. So you have your data, nice. So what to do about that? Nobody, till some years ago, sat back, check the old data, and see what we can gain out of that. So imagine, I deal with parliamentary data. Nobody, for decades, actually thought to do anything without that. Data was in some rusty and really dirty hangars, destroyed every day because of mold and humidity. And when we started getting into the Hellenic Parliament's archive, so-called archive, it was a disaster. And some of the data was permanently lost. Some of the material, because it was irreparable, damaged. Of course, AI can even help that close the missing gap, but that's another thing. So that's, by the way, and you might allow me this small parenthesis, that's the usefulness of having hard copies. Hard copies, we have hard copies from the papyrus from the pyramids. Of course, it's not like this. And you might know, have you ever tried to play a CD-ROM from 10 years ago? Sometimes it works, sometimes not. Or DVD or whatever. Or old floppy disks. I mean, that's not going to go anywhere soon. So it's counterintuitive. I recall for at least a decade or two saying, save the environment, don't print anything. That's one of the dumbest things that you can do. Of course, we're not talking about print millions of copies and disseminate to everybody that speaks Spanish or English. But for my taste, and I think there's a movement now in libraries, there's a movement saying people cut this thing with the environment and try to meaningfully preserve also through traditional paper publication. Close of parentheses. Now, and we get there slowly. I think maybe I have maybe 5 to 10 minutes more.
Sure.
We slowly get there, where we wanted. Imagine, if you recall, just 10 minutes ago, we started discussing how the US is trying to push the boundaries of AI innovation. This was all about private equity, private capital. The private companies, through their own means and by leveraging additional money from the banking system, obviously, they would invest the necessary capital, the necessary resources into building data centers, models, and so on. That was on the other side of the Atlantic. So what was here? What was this 200 billion euros about? The 200 billions was mostly about an initiative called AI Invest of the European Commission, which was about not building, because there was already a high-performance computing data space in Europe. This supercomputers existed in Europe also before AI, of course. But it was about expanding them to beyond the current perspective, so that they can sustain this huge intensity, calculation intensity that AI requires. And they call this network of AI factories. So this 200 billion, they flow into this European infrastructure. Actually, it's co-funded because it's European money plus national money, in order to build a series of supercomputers upon which this AI facilities will run. And why this is differentiated, maybe that's not clear for somebody that's not very deep into the matter. So there are two things. On the one side, you need the infrastructure. You need what we call the irons. You need the processors. But processors do nothing without. You have to tell them what to do. They need algorithms to run upon this infrastructure. And these algorithms are the models, these large language models, or whatever you can call them. They are not only this kind of technologies, there are also other types of technologies, but they are the most known. So there you have the infrastructure, which are processors, usually GPUs, graphical processing units, and you have also the models. And here there are multiple issues that are relevant for parliaments. First of all, which models? ChatGPT, Gemini, all these are US models. DeepSeek is Chinese. By the way, there are hundreds. These are the most known ones. We have also Mistral in Europe. I think Mistral was bought by Microsoft. So we don't actually have sovereign AI in Europe. There are models, by the way, that are built, and every student can build one. So it's that simple. Of course, the problem is not to create the model. The problem is to train and to find the data to legally train it. And here, kindly check the latest lawsuits in the US against ChatGPT, against Anthropic, because this data does not exist publicly. They had to steal them. And now they're facing multi-billion-dollar suits. Thank you very much. But of course, if you have then $1 trillion industry, who cares about the billions that you're going to pay? So that's another problem that we're not going to solve now. And even if you are being fined by Europe in the I think the biggest fines in the history of of the Commission were against Google or something like this. Some few billion. I mean, they make 40 billion every quarter. I don't think that they care so much about this kind of things. So what we should care about, on the other hand, would be about the models that we should use, that our institution would use. And coupled these 200 billions, coupled with the infrastructure that they're going to create, currently, as said, 19. See? Okay. Yes. Okay, 19 there. Coupled with there are two in Spain, by the way. One is operational in Barcelona, and one is in Santiago de Compostela. One of the two is functional, and the other is its inception. But they will get there eventually. We're building now. Let's get now to the interesting stuff. Okay, you have them. Thank you very much. It's not easy, but you have them. So you have to think about the models. So what kind of model are you going to use upon? And let me say there exists, or you develop a Spanish model. Are we going to use in Greece a Spanish model? I mean, our Spanish is not that good. Or let's say there are some very good German models, not very good for Greek citizens as well, because they're native German. So this means, and this is an intrinsic problematic to this whole situation, that Europe, with its 24 official languages, needs to scatter its resources. We need to develop, because for Europe, each language is equally important. We are sovereign nations. Unless we don't care anymore about Spanish, we speak Spanish nowadays, and we speak, let's bring ChatGPT. So, but he doesn't speak Spanish, we don't care. We will bring the English as official language. Unless we do these kind of things, it does matter to develop language-specific models. There is a problem with the scattered resources. We will never be, I think that we have to be very, very honest here among ourselves. Will these models be better than the best US or maybe Chinese models? I don't think so. There's not enough money, nor enough data to train them. It's impossible. Impossible is a big word. Unless we figure out a roundabout, it will be very, very challenging to do so. They work on one model, we work on 24. Now, let me bring you to the final part, maybe of the presentation. What this has to do with parliaments at all? Well, it has to do a lot, because if we want Parliament, as we started saying, to continue be relevant for the institutional system they serve, then you need to equip them with very strong tools. And unless you develop these strong tools and this strong infrastructure, what is the alternative? Can it be a real alternative that the Parliament uses third-party infrastructure, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever? I think that's a problematic situation. I think we can use them, that's my personal approach, in non-critical sectors. Legislation does not belong there. We can use it, I don't know, for maybe to write a report. Okay, and if we know the dangers, this is true. You can use that. Of course, this can flow into a legal document after some filtering. Okay, but this has to be contained, and we have to be very, very aware of actual dangers for the system since the period of innocence has long gone. So we are living in a very challenging geopolitical environment. I don't think we want to have laws that are being co-developed with third parties. This can happen. These are so complex, laws are very complex structures that a third party can easily influence very small, and they're distributed systems. We will be guided towards a goal that we never set, that was set by a third party. This can happen, and we can't allow this to happen. So, let's take a small-sized parliament like the Greek one, that does not have sufficient resources, does not have sufficient capacity, nor expertise. These three things are equally important in order to create its own AI infrastructure. And I give you the problem. Find me a solution. So we thought very hard about that over years with our team. And I think we found a solution. I honestly believe that. And we have implemented already. For me and for my team, it was the only logical consequence to link the parliamentary strategy, AI strategy, with the AI factories. The AI factory, we have one in Greece that is being developed, to link institutionally the AI factory with the parliament. Thus building and sustaining, hopefully, national AI infrastructure, or at best European/national. At some point, we have already given a lot of our sovereignty towards the European institutions. This is a small part that I'm willing to give out, since there's no other alternative. So that's the solution for Europe, so we believe, is to link the parliamentary development, technological development, which is of course linked to the procedural development. You cannot digitize, or you should not digitize bureaucracy. That makes no sense to have these overpowerful means and continue working with processes that were developed decades ago or centuries. Makes absolutely no sense. So this has to go hand in hand. Procedural plus technological innovation. And since I said, and I will add one more thing in the end. And since parliaments do not have the capacity, nor the resources, nor the expertise, at least for the European parliaments, we think that the only viable, in the medium term, I don't know in the long term, no idea, nobody knows. At least in the medium term, in the foreseeable future, the only way to have sovereign parliamentary infrastructure is linking them with the local AI factories. The same should be considered in Spain, in France, and as I said, every country will have at least one such factory. Concluding. So, okay, concluding. I think, and we have done it several times, and we always came to the conclusion that that might be one of, there might be no alternative, actually. I'm willing to believe that there's another, and I would like to point it out. I don't see it, honestly. At the same time, this brings another very serious problem that we also started with. Still, you have the parliaments there. The parliament is the building, the institution is written in the constitution and elsewhere. And still, you have the same people and the MPs that run that. And you entrust them infrastructure and tools that they have no idea how to work with. How do you think this will end? Not good. What does this mean? We have to educate them. And this is where universities come in place. Because unless we invent some other educational system that does not exist, there are two main ways to educate public administrators and politicians, MPs, let's say leaders in general. National schools of administration and universities. There's no other way. Okay, you could say also let private companies, but okay, I mean they can do this kind of consultancy, or they can supercharge some leadership training. Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that. But that's for the 0.01%. What about the 99.999%? You have to find a way, and this way it's only through universities and other educational institutes like schools of governance. But universities are not prepared for this. So how can they meaningfully adjust themselves without losing their founding spirit? We don't want to disrupt the university. So it has a few hundred years of history. So people have thought very hard about this. And that's how I would like to conclude and maybe continue the discussion later on this. The way that the European Commission found to address this issue is by means of smart and adaptive curricula. Since, as said, you cannot simply have millions of administrators. You cannot just send them back to the university to study. So you have an administration to run. You have to develop for each one individual curricula to train on the individual development paths. This might be science fiction a few years ago. No, it's not. There is a project as we speak. This is why I'm in Madrid, actually. It's called AI for Gov, Artificial Intelligence for Governance. This is a very big European project relying on the foundation of OECD digital skills, where systems are developed, where they profile you. I know profiling is not allowed. If you give it your consent. So they profile the civic servants. They profile the institutions, and they develop for each one of its administrators a specific educational path through targeted learning, multimodal, hybrid, online, physical, hybrid, mentoring, everything. On AI, based on 3 main layers. These are the 3 tiers. Let's think from top to bottom. You have to train differently a leader than a public administrator. It's not the same. The one has more strategic perspective, the other has more operational perspective. Then there are the citizens. You have to educate not only the silo, the parliamentary silo. We don't want to exclude ourselves from the society. You have also to train the stakeholders around you on how to use these new tools to approach the parliament. So there are at least, here I mentioned 3, but you can define as many as you want. For simplicity, there are 3. But these 3 layers of training need to be built differently, but based on the same principles. You need literacy, at least you need to know. We needed, I have some colleagues, they still don't know how to send emails, sorry. So you want to train these to utilize over-powerful AI. So, okay, so all has to be seen under the relevant perspective to relativate everything. In the end, and that's what I will end with, parliaments need two things. First, scientific support. And second, political oversight. A parliament without a political oversight, it's nothing. This is not good for my business. As a technology professional, I wouldn't like a politician to ask me, what do you do there? Why are you doing this like this or the other? But this is inevitable. Otherwise, there's no parliament. That's organization. That's the essential part that parliaments have. It's the political element. And without political oversight of these tools that we're talking about, that's the recipe for actual disruption in parliamentary governance. And by this, I thank you very much, and I stand at your disposal.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You want to?
No, it's just to go here
Thank you.
to the final slides.
Thank you very much for this. I think it's very realistic perspective, very realistic approach of this problem. We, in our research project, we focus on these problems and how to increase or how to strengthen the role of the parliamentary institutions through artificial intelligence. But we are starting now with specific areas, specific activities, specific uses of artificial intelligence. But from your perspective, you have a realistic one. One of the most important ones are the question of the models. They are Americans, they are
Or Chinese.
Let's put Americans first. Chinese. But Chinese, for instance, here in Spain, is interesting that you mentioned. Here in the government, we have kind of problem because the Spanish government is very related with Huawei, and the Commission is struggling with the Spanish government to break relationships with Huawei.
Not only here.
Not only here, but Spain is
issue-
one of the exceptions, like the Spanish government, and the European Union is not very happy with the Spanish government because they are like holding a strong position, not breaking with Huawei. Well, I don't want to capitalize I have several questions, but I'm going to give you the floor first if you have any question.
Starting with the end of your presentation, of course, saying thank you for your speech. The political oversight of technical developments in parliaments, no? Which elements are relevant to this oversight? Which kind of boards or committees, if guidelines are a good tool to begin with the oversight, what's your experience on how to implement this oversight?
Oversight is, of course, an abstract concept, and it can be different from parliament to parliament, and also the level of oversight may also vary a lot. So, in my understanding, as it stands now, and that's already a problem, because as these systems change very quickly, our perspectives might need to adjust very quickly. And this is a problem also in parliaments, where you might talk about years to establish a committee, and then you have it, and then the next day it's useless because everything has shifted. That's something, we're not responsible for this. But okay, you cannot be responsible for everything. The political system or elites, they have to figure out an issue or work around. There are ways, by the way. My perspective currently is a rather, and there are examples is a political oversight committee supported by some sort of a task force. Politicians are good in what they do, and engineers and plus linguists. I said it's an interdisciplinary approach. There have to be multidisciplines there, and these people are very good at what they do. So they have to interact in a very defined way in order to apply political oversight, evidence support. Usually, politicians tend to overreact or quickly judge something. This oversight, such oversight committees need to be supported by an interdisciplinary board in order to have high technical and factual relevance. The question about how this could be materialized meaningfully, I would say a very good example is the Spanish Senate that enacted just a week ago the own set of guidelines. So the basic question is how they intend to supervise this meaningfully and over lengthier periods, because we have all seen such moves that last maybe for a term or half a term, and then they start to go away or become less meaningful. I think that this has to be shown to be institutionalized. When I ask my colleagues and members of parliaments, they are tired. They say, oh, another committee. Oh, we have too many of it. Okay, I mean, maybe you can repurpose an existing committee. Like, the fact that there has to be some sort of political oversight does not mean that you need to have another committee. You can use an established committee or to extend the goals or the objectives of any given existing committee. So that's for the current discussion. I think it's very relevant since the Spanish Senate has established this. It's the role of the academia also to assess this and support that in a meaningful way. Maybe your project, maybe this is the best way to show to the world how praxis relevant it is. To go actively and say, okay, we, not else, we, 1, 2, 3, we will support you in this. Technical support, legal support, legal/technical support. So that you make it actually, they made that was a difficult step. I'm not trying, to say, okay, they built some. I don't want to relativate this or down talk it. It was a big step to have these guidelines. Now it's an even more difficult step to make them meaningful. And you can be, the Institute of Parliamentary Law can be of real useful.
Jefe is the chair of the Parliamentary Institute, so maybe you would like to react to this or not.
Yes, my reaction has been very clear.
By the way, I'm not
I
suggesting something that I didn't suggest already to my parliament. I suggest exactly the same.
we probably should go to a small parliament,
Maybe some regional, I don't know.
a kind of a sandbox. Prove it first how it works.
Yeah, the sandbox, it's a very nice term, but we are talking here about everything is now critical. So, but the political leadership, of course, they know what they are doing. Of course, they know that they could do it in a sandbox environment, but they felt the urgency and made it in the Senate. So this means for everybody, and not only my personal perception, when the urgency has reached the politicians, then it's already too late, actually. So out there, you see the boards of companies, of private companies, they go wild. And here still, Parliament's okay. They are, and I'm not saying we need to compete in any means with private service, private sector in terms of bringing AI everywhere. No, that's not correct. Obviously, we saw the 95.5% effectiveness of these kind of technologies. No, but still, meaningful interaction and integration needs to be applied, and meaningful is empty unless we provide some actual content. And how can we find what is meaningful without actually interacting with that? So they have placed these guidelines in place. Very nice. By the way, who's going to measure? You saw the MIT report. I will ask some open question, and of course, anybody can respond. Do you know how many studies exist in the world currently evaluating the use of AI in parliaments? How many? And could you? I mean, you can go to Google Scholar or other. Zero. There's no single study that evaluates meaningfully or not meaningfully and evaluates in any case. There's no study. I tried with also the help of the Senate. I tried to disseminate some questionnaires, but this is not in a global research. But these are expert surveys. You don't get actual evaluation. That's you get a sense what this means. So, parliaments are notoriously closed to science, and you are best positioned to well integrated and network in order to go in there and actually measure this. And do you belong to the 5% or to the 95%? So, and of course, I advocated for the link of the parliament with an AI factory. So imagine the analogy to have for the power supply of the parliament a nuclear factory. That's the analogy. That's the analogy. So you have something overpowerful. The parliament is a small. It's a small institution, and compared to the national governance administration, it's a small institution, and you have an overpowerful system. You need to be able to understand it and to use it for your own good. So you have to be very cautious on what you do. Otherwise, you can do a lot of harm without knowing. That's the worst thing. You might be able to blow things up without knowing, and then ex post, you will say, okay, oh yes, they used it and they tore the whole system apart. Yeah, thank you very much. So still things can happen, but I mean that's the meaning of having political oversight and technical support in this. And in this case, the institute might be the technical support to this political oversight body. I mean, you can have either you could have other systems. I mean, there's for civil rights or for human rights, there have been for decades the system of the advocate, human rights advocate in parliaments or some agency. You could have something like this. I mean, this is up to the national system how it will be defined. You can have an AI advocate here.
Oh, yes.
Or
like a data protection.
Yeah.
Agent.
Yeah. In Scandinavian countries, they have the ombudsman, right? It could be an AI ombudsman. It's
You mean in the Parliament?
yeah, in the Parliament. But of course,
But that's really a nice to take.
so but somebody needs to have to take responsibility. I mean,
We have to reflect on a strategy of how to implement AI and then how to supervise. We need a reflection within parliaments.
the positioning of a set of guidelines is already a big strategy step. So this is
Only
already
the guidelines.
so.
That's
So-
the guideline.
The guidance, I'm afraid the guidance, at least in the Spanish case, isn't that true strategy.
But still, sometimes, I mean, we think of a strategy being something, a document that has a beginning and an end. Usually for corporations, it might be like this. But strategy does not need to be defined in political or in a technical matter. It's more of an inception. So, yeah, we have this guidelines, and within this is you build a framework. What guidelines mean that you can do something or you shouldn't do something outside. So you framed the use and the introduction of AI in the parliamentary workspace. Nice. That's big strategy step, essential. Now, there are many other steps. For instance, from all the possible technologies and applications, whom do you choose? So you have to prioritize. Then, if you prioritize, you have to build. But if you have to build, then you have to monitor. So but all this, we like to have it in small boxes, but it will run at the same time. So you need somebody that takes the responsibility. Of course, always the political responsibility lies with the president of the parliament, with the speaker. Thank you very much, but that's you're not you're not tackling the problem. If you say that the speaker is the president is responsible, of course he or she is, of course. But actually, who does this? So you need some committee, some person, some structure existing. You don't need to create something. Can be an existing structure entrusted with this. And don't tell me that they have too much to do. Somebody has to do it. So,
Do you think it's a political decision or administrative decision?
It's always a political. I mean, if you start bottom up, it will stop somewhere because that's how administration, traditional Weber administrations, hierarchical administrations, if you don't get from above any direction, what do you do? Well, it has to be top down usually, and unless if it's not political, then what else? And even our suggestion for the linkage between parliaments has been a technical suggestion based on the study, but the speaker decided on this. They signed documents, they signed an MOU with the factory. So it's not like, okay, we did the study, we did the report, we suggested it, but somebody needs to say, yes, let's do it.
Thank you very much for this enlightening presentation. And firstly, I want to say that I'm an absolute beginner to this subject, so I don't know very much about it. But during your presentation, I was constantly thinking, yeah, that's due to the principle of parliamentary autonomy. Is that also how you are analyzing artificial intelligence in a coherent manner? That this is actually principle of parliamentary?
Yeah, we had a discussion earlier on with the gentleman here. So some things we are doing actually contrast the old principles, Montesquieuian principles of parliamentary autonomy and separation of powers. I think we have to, these technologies will make us rethink a lot of traditional concepts. Currently, in my understanding of things, parliaments are being redefined as data hubs. Data is moving through the government system, but parliaments are hubs. Legislative data, oversight data, data from citizens, from MPs. So, and parliaments have to manage. These are data hubs. At the same time, this means that the interfaces to the other institutions of governance, judiciary, independent state bodies, or international bodies. So it's a multi-governance system, multi-level governance system. So these need to be very well defined, not in terms only of legally defined. They are already legally defined. I mean, you don't do whatever you want. So there are treaties, the constitutions, laws, whatever. The data interfaces need to be defined as well. That I communicate in a defined manner with the judiciary. What does this mean for my data? Who knows? We have to define this. It's very specific now. It has been specific from a legal sense, but now it has to be specific in a technical sense. You have to build systems that communicate with each other. Okay, this might listen a little bit like Orwellish, but I mean, we have to govern societies of billions. You cannot. We are built AI exactly for this purpose, in order to govern our data. And we can't say, okay, we will seclude ourselves, we will close ourselves within our silo, we don't talk with nobody else. That's no governance. That's disaster. So actually, it's counterintuitive, but we have to collaborate in more, and we have to expand the cycles of traditional governance as they were. Inevitably, there will be overlaps. Not nice from the legal constitutional perspective, overlapping judiciary with parliament, parliament with ministries. Not nice, but it has to be done.
By interface, you mean agents or just?
Well, by interfaces, I mean how systems
Talk
to each other
Okay.
in a meaningful way, and they understand each other.
Interoperable.
Yeah, well, what kind of data? I mean, you know already what kind of documents you are exchanging with the judiciary.
Yeah.
You know, exactly. I mean, nobody comes out from a court and comes here and say, take this. So you know what, who brings it, how to accept it. So all this will have to be redefined in a manner that these modern systems understand it. And by the way, maybe you have read it just days ago. Google is redefining its APIs and how its browsers, Chrome browsers work, so that the data they generate and exchange are now fully AI ready. Meaning whatever it's the web is already prepared. It's data, but data is not equal data. There are different levels of data maturity, let's say, or level of structured data, a certain scheme as well. So all goes to this direction. And I don't think that we should hold back to that. It is counter to the principle also of openness and transparency. But we know that absolute openness and transparency is another thing. Okay, I don't go to this direction, but the things that people should know, they should know, and that should be fully open and properly displayed. That's the disclosure factor. What should be closed within the Parliament premises, that's defined on legally and the Constitution. So that's okay. So whatever has to be public and communicating towards any other direction, this has to be very well defined so that it is anticipated. And because these systems, they are constantly there, they're always on. Always on. These are always on devices. Always on. So we have to build parliamentary systems that are always on. That we have to build personalized systems that any one of us, when a legislation that comes out that is relevant for me, I have to be informed. I mean, constitutionally, we need to know all laws. How? That's how. These kind of systems empower actually the traditional constitutional principles. They assess continuously, and for my personal well-being, and this is up to us still to define exactly what does this mean for the person, for its national, for its individual drives and freedoms, and that's up on us to define. And I think instead of fearing and acting against, I think maybe we should be here counterintuitive and be more aggressive towards defining the better for the human subjects and for our institutions. So that can only happen if we are proactive. We can always wait and see what happens. And possibly most of the politicians will do that. Still, I don't think that's the right way to go. I think here we must be a little bit, we cannot afford to lose a lot of time against our adversaries, and I'm not seeing that in a geopolitical sense. Adversaries of democracy, they're everywhere. And they're already using this kind of tasks, of tools and services better than we do.
Any other question? No? I would like to ask you one use of artificial intelligence, but the thing that you mentioned that we need to prepare data in order to use artificial intelligence systems and tools. For me, one of the most interesting uses of artificial intelligence is to elaborate bills, proposals, but for that, you need to allow the artificial intelligence understand a localized process, the previous legislative bills or whatever. And for that, there are some parliaments like Australia, they are coding bills, they are drafting bills, like normal language, but with codes also. Do you know other parliaments that are fostering this activity?
Yes,
and what do you think about it? If it is...
Well, Spain is actually pioneering this with Comantoso and Leos. Spain was one of the first.
Spain is working on that.
Really?
Yeah.
In the Congress? In the Senate?
In the Congress, not in the Senate. In the Congress and in
The presidency of the government.
the publication of laws. Yes,
These are two different things. This is very important, but it gets slightly more detail. So what we currently have we had for 2,500 years, or since Hammurabi and stone, let's say, everything was written form, right? Mm-hmm. So the outcome of the legislative process was stone, marble, a nice piece of government gazette. That was this still is, and will continue to be. It has one fundamental problem. It is not machine readable. Machine readable. But Of course, machines can process that, but machines do not understand language. They don't understand in the actual sense. They process it. And they process everything, text, and they don't understand the meaning. So you somehow need to provide meaning to this text so that machines can be able, when they process it, to understand, that's the title. That's an article. That's a paragraph. That's a subparagraph. Blah, blah, blah. So there's since a few years, not too many, less than a decade, we have developed an actual standard. There's a legal standard for this. It's called the Documentación or legal document. So this standard is used in Spain, in the European Commission, in Italy, and in many, many other countries. We have used it also in Greece as an exemplary, and it has function. So that machines, when they are reading a law, that they understand the parts of the law, the structure. But what does it mean for the actual meaning? Nothing. So there are other types of standards, legal rule amendment and others, where you can teach the system the actual meaning of the law. And so without wanting to complex things more, what this means is that I can see it as a real alternative for in the future, to have multiple representations of the law, equally valid, meaning the PDF or the print, the physical print of the physical gazette will be valid before courts or before administration, the same as the Documentación representation or the semantic representation of the law. So the ideal world, in the ideal universe, you have these three representations, the holy triad, and they're equally important, equally valid, let's say. And in a more ideal universe, the Parliament does not enact only the one representation that is being enacted. The Parliament votes and enacts all three representations.
Similar than the linguistic versions in Documentación.
Exactly. So when you say in the European Parliament you have 24 official languages, so they vote, and every 24 is, of course, it's a mess. Yes, of course, but still, it solves a lot of problems. But they are equally important. They're not. You don't have the English or the less important than the Greek. There's more work for the courts, of course, but that's a different story. But imagine the advantages for the systems that process this kind of law. It could tell you, can already tell you, but it could be very, very accurate. Structured data, tense, that's you can highlight it as much as you want. We know that large language models are trained with data. It tends to be, this training, more efficient. It has to, with the quality of data. Data is not equal to data. If you have structured data, the training is much more important because it understands what exactly, that's the title, that's this is this element, this is that element. So this creates very high quality data, this kind of representation. So you can build systems that not only process law, but actually understand law and apply it to personal individuals, to specific individuals. This would mean, of course, the end of the legal profession, right? That's already discussed. I have heard it in conference many years ago in legal informatics. The retail legal profession, right? Not the legal profession per se, but actually I go to my lawyer similar as I go to my doctor.
Mhm.
Sorry for the doctors and for the lawyers, but I don't think we're very far from that.
The
That's a good sentence to finish, maybe. Sorry for the lawyers. Sorry for the lawyers.
It's only 10 years to be retired, so
Yeah.
this is more for you.
I don't know if you have any other comment or.
Oh, sorry for the Parliament, no, I don't want to say.
We are not sorry for the Parliament. Maybe we should say that.
But equally, imagine a lawyer being aware and knowing how to program these tools. We are talking not, it's wrong to see that as an actual blockade, but this is actually the total freedom for the skilled professional.
Mhm.
Imagine what one person, skilled lawyer, utilizing this kind of tool, you're practically empower one person, one lawyer, doing stuff that a multi-million lawyer company can do. And you will have a lot of these lawyers. Because systems continue to become complex, so they need governance, they need regulation, so lawyers will continue, of course, to exist. They have to adapt. This is all about adaptation. Personal, professional, institutional.
Okay, so Fotis, Dr. Fitsilis, thank you very much for this wonderful time. We have learned a lot. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. I hope you come back very early, very soon.
Not in 10 years from now?
No, in 10 years for sure. We will invite you. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.